one of the things we do highlight here is that every one of you may have written papers in the past, and every one of you may have gotten published in the past. The difference with this series is that we are engaging you on how to write, submit, and publish your manuscript in the Q1, Q2 level journal. So once again, it's possible you have a habit, you have done well, you're publishing papers, but there's a need to get yourself into Q1, Q2 journals. Q1 to Q2 journals are very important because, one, they bring you visibility, they bring your work, and they make your work feasible. If WHO, UNICEF, PEPFAR, Global Fund want evidence for action, they will look into peer-reviewed journals, and they will take Q1, Q2 journals seriously. Publishing in lower level journals, there's nothing wrong. However, strive for Q1, Q2 level journals. Q1 journals will always do the best in terms of retaining themselves in Q1. Q2 journals will continue to improve and strive because they want to become Q1 journals. The big deal about Q1, Q2 journals or any Q index journal is that it is peer reviewed. I repeat it is peer reviewed. You must be interested in having your manuscript peer reviewed. Peer review enables you, for most part, we know there's always bad peer review. Even you and I can do bad peer reviewing, and I'll talk about that. We have a section that is looking at peer review, and we'll spend time discussing peer reviewing. Peer review improves the quality of manuscript once it is done well. It does strengthen manuscript. And what happens is that it reduces the risk of unwholesome information being out there in the public. Because people in the public who uses this for policy making, formulation, drug development, etc., may not know, may not be able to distinguish, the faults with your manuscript or the shortcomings of the piece of work you've done. It's the peer reviewer that looks at it, knows that no, this is not factual. No, this can be strengthened. So you must welcome peer review. I did share with somebody that I was with a journal. I'd written about 3 articles. The first time there was no peer review comment. I wrote them, where's your peer reviewers comment? They didn't say. Second time, the same thing. When it happened the third time, and I was talking with the colleagues, I said, this is really strange. I can't even get it. If it's to say, oh, there's no problem. You must be interested in peer review. This is not the time for this. You have a session that is devoted to peer review. But once again, the things you've been doing, you've been publishing, I'm not arguing. What we're doing here is improving our competencies to ensure that we can publish in Q1, Q2 journal. Writing a manuscript is ABC. What makes it ABC? There are rules governing it. Once you understand the rules that govern manuscript writing, that enables you to get into those spaces, you can only improve on it because that becomes your framework, and you then continue to improve on the quality. So I want to show you off my university today. I work with Obafemi Awolowo University, but that's also where I graduated, and our motto is learning and culture. So yes, if you have a child or sibling that you're thinking about the university, think of Ife. It's great. Ife. It's the one university there is in the country, and it's the most beautiful campus in Africa. Today, I'll be taking you through these 4 phases. I'll describe the process of interpreting key findings for your research results to enable you to write your discussion. I'll talk about what it means to compare and contrast findings from studies with unusual results, making valid inferences, and making recommendations. So this is my outline. I'll discuss the importance of the discussion section, the content, and how to write it. And then I'll summarize and conclude. So why is the discussion section very important? The discussion section of your manuscript, believe me, it actually is the most difficult if you ask me. And let me tell you why. It's not as easy as that. It's a skill. Why? Because when you find your results, when you get your results, you have to think through and study again. Why is that result like that? remember you're going to discuss it, you have to explain why. So it's as good as the study you did for your introduction. That is how hard the study in the discussion section is. Because you have to figure out why. Why was my result like this? Why is my result the same as every other person? Because remember, when you started your introduction, it wasn't you gave a justification that there was a difference, there was something missing, there was an information not to know. Now you get to your discussion and it's the same. Your prevalence figure is the same with the rest of the world. Why is it the same? That is difficult to respond to without you studying hard. So that is why the discussion section, can be a bit difficult. Well, it's not difficult, that's not the word. A bit challenging to write. And if the discussion section also tells the readers what your study means and why it is important. The big deal is that when you write a discussion well, it raises new questions all the time. It raises new questions. It makes us answer, yes, I've gotten this answer. However, there's this piece that is still missing. And many people will, because of the questions you have raised, now go and do the research, including yourself. When you write an excellent discussion session, then it becomes a quote for another person, because it's the questions you raise that becomes their own new study inquiry, and therefore they will quote your paper. And so your ingenuity, thought, concept, and reflection starts to show up here. Your ingenuity and the way you think through enables you to generate a new hypothesis to be studied. You raise questions and then people pick it up and go to do further questions. And that's what makes your research important and reference. It's your discussion. When you can do a discussion strong enough, you find out that not only do people read it, because the number of reads and the number of downloads now counts when we're talking about your impact, people also reference it. All right. So we'll go through today learning how you put that discussion together. Just like I noted in introduction, it takes skills and you almost must be like a storyteller. It must flow, it must be interesting. Somebody must pick it up and not want to drop it, because you are providing new insights through the lens of your results. You're providing new insights, and it must be powerful insights. So this is usually the content of your discussion. And I know I'm going to disrupt a lot of people's thinking about how things are. But believe me, if you're going to go into a Q1, Q2 journal, this is the outline for most parts. This is the outline. And once again, I confess I'm going to do a lot more to the biomedical side, but as much as possible, link it to qualitative. So I'm doing a lot more of talking around quantitative research. I'll link it also to qualitative. In your discussion section, your first paragraph is a summary of finding. This is not what many people do. You just go straight and discuss. No. Your first paragraph is a summary of the findings of your results. The summary of the answer to your study objectives. That is what the first paragraph is. And this is why I encourage people, especially people from social science. I see that you do this unconsciously. In your results, you start to give interpretation to your results when you're writing the result. No. In your result, you report exactly what you found. 23.5%, 22.2%, 10.7%. If that is what you found in your result, write it like that. What I see from many people coming from the social sciences angle is that in that place, they start to write 1 in 4, 1 in 2. That's an interpretation of your finding. That's not your result. Your result is 20%, 32%. Write it like that, because you will need this interpretation in the discussion. So if my objective was to find the prevalence of caries in preschool children, my result now says the prevalence of caries is 3.4%. My interpretation when I'm writing my summary is that the prevalence, the study shows that 1 in 20 children 3 to 5 years old are likely to have caries. Okay, so once you can learn that languaging, you would see one of the things it does for you and how it helps you in the discussion section. So your first paragraph is a summary, and you end it by saying, oh, the results validated your hypothesis, or it was not the same as your hypothesis. That would be your last sentence. The second paragraph now highlights the strength of the study. What makes this strong? This is the first time the study is being done. You use the robust analysis method. Highlight the strengths. The third paragraph, or maybe in the same second paragraph, you also write the limitations. This once again might be unusual because many people seem to have an order where they write the limitation at the end. But if you've been following this manuscript writing section, once I got into methodology, I referred you to research guidelines. Every single type of research under the sun has a research guideline. If you want to find it, go to just type equator or research guidelines in your Google. It will take you to Equator. Equator has a compilation of the research guideline for every type of study in this world. So go look at your research guidelines. It will tell you what is expected in your manuscript and the order in which they want these things found. If you can adhere to a research guideline, you would rarely get a reject. Rarely, I can tell you that rarely. You might get a reject, oh, this manuscript does not fit into the journal, because you would have followed the rules. Once again, manuscript writing has rules. It is ABC. Go get a research guideline and follow it line by line and tick it off. If you follow research guidelines by Equator line by line, which is what Q1, Q2 journals expect you to follow, you will find that after the summary, they expect you to write the strengths and limitations. It doesn't usually come at the end. And why is this? They expect you to write the limitations up front so that whoever is reading the manuscript is reading the entire manuscript, understanding the limitation of the interpretations they will be receiving. They must see that up front before absorbing the information you're sharing with them. That's why limitation comes up front. And remember, when you're writing your manuscript, it's not about you. It's about putting the truth out there in the world so that people can use this truth as a foundation for the next level of truth. We're looking for an ultimate truth, or the truths there are. And therefore, you're enabling people to use evidence as concretely as possible would enable us to get to where we are. So it's not about you don't limit the truths about you are not miser. You shouldn't miser the truths about your limitation because you do it's not about you. Once the limitations are there, we're clear. Okay, this is the much there is about what this study can tell, and I take it. But once you don't put your limitations it's not okay, it's not fair, it's not about you, it's about the world. Once you do that, the next paragraph is now discussing your findings. How do they relate to what others have done, which many of us are very good at doing? So we say, the prevalence of caries is 3.5. It is lower than that of Asia and higher than that of Norway. We kind of are good at that. But that's not the strength of your limitation. You must explain why. Why is it higher? Why is it the same? Why is it lower? It's not enough to say there is a difference or you compare and contrast. You must explain it. Explain any surprising findings, unexpected findings, or if there's an inconclusive result, you must explain it. Okay, and then you now make suggestions for further research. And if you have the power to write in a way that you put this together like you are postulating a new hypothesis, that's powerful. And then you conclude. And we'll be talking about each of these sections as we go forward. Please note that in your discussion section, you should not have the following information. First, you cannot discuss what was not in your results. You only discuss your results. You only discuss your results. So you cannot be in discussion section and be seeing new results that you do not report in the results section. Okay, that's very important. Only results that you reported in your results section should be discussed. The second thing, which is a major issue that I see when people write, is repeating the results in the discussion. For example, and that is why I explained you must have skills about writing. In your results, you saw the prevalence as 34%. You now come to the discussion. You now say, the prevalence in our study, the prevalence is 34%, which is higher than the 68, which is higher than the 32 in Turkey and lower than the 64 in India. You don't repeat your results. Remember that you have written your summary and interpreted your result in your summary. You found out that 1 in 4, 1 in 10, 1 in 25, that's an interpretation. Okay? And then when you're discussing it, you find out that your prevalence is higher than the 32% in India and lower than the 68% in Norway. That is how you write it. You don't start to, all the result, 34%, 63%, you don't bring those figures into discussion again. One of the beauties about writing manuscripts is that you are not finding the same things, although it's a stream, a flow from your introduction to your objective result discussion is a flow. And everything is interconnected. You are not repeating yourselves. You are not repeating it. You must be wise with words. You must have the power of using the words. And there are ways you learn it. And once you learn it, it's yours forever. Okay? Another thing is that you don't discuss outside the scope of your study objective. Focus on your study objective. My study objective is to compare A and B. However, my confounder is C. You don't start discussing F and S, or start to, go beyond what is there. Discuss your study objective. If in that process of doing your analysis, you found something that is interesting, that is not the scope of this paper. This paper is focused on your study objective. Just discuss your study objectives. Be focused. That's what it is. The power of your study, of your power of your manuscript is being focused. Be focused. Leave everything out, no matter how interesting it is. It's not the place. And another headache that you find in discussion is unwarranted speculation. And general, you just make, okay, for example, let's say I studied girls and boys, okay? Without understanding the difference between male and female use of drinking of Coke. Let me take that. You found out that males drink more males drink Coke than females. More males drink Coke than females. That was your objective. You now start to discuss it and start saying they drink soft drinks. Okay. You only studied Coke. You did not study Coke soft drinks. You did not even study water. It is Coke. So you discuss Coke. You don't now generalize the statement and say, oh, men are always drinking more. They're always drinking, You don't know about maybe it's Fanta, maybe Pepsi. You don't know that it's Coke. Don't make sweeping statements. I'd seen a case before and I was really surprised. This person didn't even do the statistical analysis. So it's about, let's say, 4 girls take Coke and 2 boys take Coke. And this person wrote 2 pages of discussion on 4 girls take Coke and 2 boys take Coke. with the conclusion that there were more girls than boys taking coke. He went to town. And there wasn't even a statistical analysis, but just because you saw 4 girls, I'm telling you, it was close in number. So you don't do that kind of sweeping statement, just focus, okay? And you discuss tangible issues that are connected, that makes meaning, okay? And don't make conclusions that are not supported by your data. For example, let me explain. More girls than your study said, I'm looking at the prevalence of gender difference in the drinking of coke. My study has shown with all evidence that more girls than boys drink coke. My conclusion is that more girls than boys drink coke. You now don't go and be making recommendations that going forward to the price of coke to be made cheaper, or we should go and be educating the public about coke drinking in a way that your study did not look at education. Your study did not look at, it didn't go that direction. Your direction was just prevalence, small girl. Then your recommendation at the best is that let us understand, further studies are needed to understand why more girls are taking coke than boys. That is it. But for you to now be going, let's go and be educating the public, that's out of the scope. You never studied. You have no data to support education. You have no data to support putting the bottle. Your data is just prevalent. You might want to explore as a recommendation in your conclusion that we need to know why more girls than boys are taking coke. Your discussion also needs to be interesting and relevant. It has to be powerful. Once again, it is discussion. It's not comparison of data. It is discussion. You must discuss. And when you're discussing, remember you've written your summary, you've written your strengths and limitation, what you want to discuss. Most importantly, discuss the new finding. What is really new about your study? Let that be the first paragraph around the discussion. What is the key thing? Not necessarily following the order of your objective. If you had 1, 2, 3 objectives, you don't first discuss objective 1 or objective 2. Not necessarily that order. Discuss what is new. This slide might be one of the most challenging things to do. You don't get there overnight. You grow into writing your discussion section better and better and better and better with time. Okay? It's a matter of time. You grow, but you must start with the focus as to where you're going. Discuss what is important that is new. Let me explain one of them. Remember, okay, let us start this prevalence. Let's say the prevalence of if there's gender difference in people taking coke. Okay? Your introduction has helped us to understand why it is important for us to now find gender differences. Maybe it has never been done. Okay? However, your study has shown that taste buds differ by gender. Okay? And there is evidence that there's more sugar in coke than in other drinks. And taste buds also differ by gender for sugar intake. Maybe. Okay? That was the reason, your justification. And then you did your objective, which is looking at whether there's a gender difference, there's an association between gender and drinking coke. You did your study, and now your result now shows that significantly there's more girls than boys that take coke. Okay? Now when you want to discuss it, it's not enough to say more boys and girls take coke, and then you look at okay, let's say now you found out that there's no difference. It's not enough to say there's no difference. You have to explain why there's no difference. Is it that in Nigeria this is surprising because based on your introduction you had expected and you had hypothesized that there will be a difference. However, you have not found a difference. Maybe Maybe there's a cultural difference. Maybe in Africa, maybe in cultures, taste buds differences in the taste buds do not develop early, because here we don't introduce sugar in Africa until late adolescence. You must explain it. You must explain why there isn't. That is what the discussion is. And then when you're discussing, link your findings. Don't try to avoid this thing where paragraph 1, you discuss one thing. Paragraph 2, you discuss something. Paragraph 3, okay, so in paragraph 1, there's no gender. No, the prevalence is high. Paragraph 2, the male and female difference is there. Paragraph 3, the age difference is there. It doesn't make interesting reading. It's not wrong. It's okay, but as much as possible, link them so that your paragraph 1, when it's talking about high prevalence, is starting to introduce, even in that paragraph, the probability that there was already Prof studies have shown that there's gender differences, and that links you to bring gender into that discussion. Without necessarily saying paragraph 2, we also found that. In your paragraph 1, you state prevalence. However, Prof studies have shown that there's gender differences with taste buds around sugar. This explains why our study may have also found gender differences. You've linked it to the next paragraph without saying our next finding is gender differences. So it makes interesting reading. One of the powerful things you must learn to have is this transition statement. The transition statement allows you to move from one topic to another smoothly without disengaging the reader from that trend of thoughts. The power to learn how to transit to a new topic without that obviousness that you are transiting is a skill that we can acquire. When we get to our conclusion, you remember that in your discussion, you are going to write your conclusion as the last part. There are things that are expected in the conclusion. The conclusion is not long. It's maybe about 3 sentences. You must restate the most important. What is the answer to your objective? What is the answer? That's it. We found here that the prevalence of taking coke is high. It's not 34%, it's high. Even if it's higher or lower than other places. This has implication for the risk of caries in children. That's the implication. Further, future research is recommended to understand why there is a high uptake of cocaine amongst Nigerian children in Nigeria. That's all. Your conclusion must not only highlight the answers to your objective, but also recommendation. Those are the 2 things you look for in the conclusion statement. The answer to the questions and the recommendations. Which shows the future directions to go. Please don't introduce a new argument or new data in your conclusion. That's not the place. Any argument or discussion is in the discussion section. The conclusion is wrapping it up. You must not find something new that you have not read about in your discussion in your conclusion. You must ensure that you answer the research question in your conclusion. And this answer is the major result, the big picture. The big picture is what you are after in your results, okay? And the recommendation. The discussion is, and like I said, this is very important because the discussion is you. That starts to reflect you. In your introduction, every single statement is quoted. There's a reference. It's not your opinion. It's just your thinking. Your introduction is an unearthing of evidence in the field. And therefore, every statement in your introduction has a quote. In your discussion, it is your opinion and your understanding that you are pulling together. Therefore, it does not have to be quoted. Usually in the discussion section, that's where you find the least number of references, except when you are pulling evidence to support your hypothesis or your assertion. but discussion, and that is where you put it clearly that it is an opinion that you're sharing here. And this is where your power of reasoning starts to show. And that is why your manuscript will be quoted. You must tell a coherent story. It's like a storybook. And this discussion needs to use language reflective of the study design without overstretching the truth. And I'll take a little bit of time to explain this. If you did a cross-sectional study, and please know that most of the qualitative studies are cross-sectional studies, you cannot be talking about cause-inference relationship. You cannot, because cross-sectional studies can never deduce cause. Well, let me not say never. There are places where you can use it. But for the big parts, cross-sectional studies, including qualitative studies, cannot say a cause-effect relationship. So when you are reporting your finding, you must be mindful of that language, not to report and say it is that, oh, girls, I found that there are more girls that are taking coke than boys in my cross-sectional study. When I'm reporting, I'll say the result of my study suggests that more girls take coke than boys. That's how I use it when I do cross-sectional study, because what it's only doing is suggesting. It cannot say cause, it cannot conclude. It's not a longitudinal study. At the same time, when you're discussing, remember I did the study in Ile-Ife. I cannot be saying Nigeria. I cannot be saying Africa. That's overstretching the truth. All I did was Ife local government. And therefore, in my reflections, in my discussion, I might bring in the fact that there might be something to do with Yorubas. But I can't stretch it to Igbo and West Africa. It's a stretch. So these are the kind of ways that you cannot stretch the truths unnecessarily. In addition, when you're also writing your discussion section, avoid it's a consciousness, a reflection of your personal bias. Okay, I'm going to say, I think that study that I read, no, there was somebody else. I just said, immediately I read, it was during my manuscript training course. So she came to my manuscript training course. The minute I read, I just wrote, I said, you are a Christian. And therefore, you judge. The judgment about people who have premature sex is so strong that you judge them even in your discussion. And that is, when we're not cautious, these are personal biases, reflects in our writing. And it takes over an objective discussion. So you did a study and you found that 32% of girls, adolescent girls, have multiple sex partners. Okay. And then your discussion is about promiscuity and illicit sex, and that's all you are seeing in all of the teen. That's all you are seeing. And how they will get STI. But you didn't do that research, and how HIV is knocking at their door. It's a reflection. It reflects your personal bias. And without this consciousness that you yourself must be out of the way. This paper is not about you. It's about presenting the truth so that the world, facts, it's not truth. You're presenting facts so that the world can use it to do something else. Use it as a foundation for looking for other facts that gets us to truth, or use it for policy. You can use it. It's not about you. Reflect the objective. Your language must show that you are not. We're going to talk about languages, communication in another section that helps you learn how you dissociate yourself from your papers, how your paper must be objective. I'm talking about exactly what it says without reflecting your bias. Otherwise, and I do know that happens in many qualitative study, high-level qualitative study, you confess your bias from the beginning, and people can then understand where you are reflecting from. For more powerful quantitative study, it helps if you look through the lens of a theory. That's why, if you remember very well, when we were talking about theory, it helps you if you reflect through the lens of a theory. When you started, you proposed your theory. Now in your discussion, you are now discussing through the lens of a theory. You find out that it allows you to disabuse yourself also, because you will now discuss your finding reflecting through the lens of a theory, and everybody knows where this discussion is biased to. It is a lot more objective and has nothing to do with your personal values. And finally, please note that the discussion should give new directions to readers. You must finish when somebody puts down that paper and starts to think, I never thought of this, so I never thought of this. Why? Look at this. And you know what? That person would go do that study and they will coach you. One of the things I say is that even you yourself that wrote that paper, because your study is bringing new directions, you yourself will go and do another study with that new direction, and you will coach yourself. It is an unusual thing that you have written a manuscript 5 years and nobody has quoted it. It's not a success story. It's a terrible story, because it means that even you yourself do not find your paper and your discussion relevant for you enough to say, based on the reflection of that paper, you are going further to explore better. For example, you said more females than male drink. You have already encouraged us. Can we go on to understand why more females? That is opening a door for a qualitative study. Even you, as a researcher, a lifelong researcher, should have picked that and gone to do the study and tell us why, and reflect on help us understand why more female. In that way, you would have quoted yourself, knowing that was what gave you direction. So it's 5 years later down the line, 10 years, you have one paper and nobody has collected, or you have 10 paper, you're already ready for, you're going for promotion for professor, you have 30 papers, nobody has quoted them. That is failure. Failure extraordinary. I check my manuscript. It's a problem for me. Of course, when I have a history of writing, and I know my bad papers. I know my papers that are bad, which are done in my younger years. But I put energy in my work, and nobody finds it interesting. It is disturbing for me. Okay? That's what I look when I see my papers quoted, especially when it's quoted in policy documents. WHO quotes, I celebrate. That's all that matters. It shows that it is important. I have done something of social value. Okay, this is not about me, it's about you. All right, thanks for listening. And I open up the space for questions. Thank you. So if you have questions, just raise your electronic card. Yes, promise. And then I'll also read the chat box. But Promise, please go ahead. Toby, can you unmute Promise to enable him to ask his question? Thank you. Go ahead, Promise.
Good morning, Ma. Good morning, Prof. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Ma, for today. I just have a question about the discussion. I don't know about others, but I personally find it difficult. I think I'm quite discriminated in repeating the results, like what you said about 60%, and I'll come right there 60%, and then I'll try to relate it to other evidences that have been conducted in other places or studies. So I find it difficult getting the prevalence, yes, or like what you said, 1 in 3, 1 in 5. So I don't know how I can get to, streamline it towards that direction. So I would really appreciate if there's a guide. I've also gone through the literature, manuscript writing guide. So
excellent. So much. All right, I'll just repeat it. Okay, I think that might help. And Benisola, just hold on. Let me finish with Promise. So in your result, you got 23%. Okay? You write it, don't summarize. In your summary, you say about 1 in 4. 23% is about 1 in 4. Remember that 1 in 4 is not 23%. 1 in 4 is 25%. So your 23%, you state it clearly in your result. You don't say 1 in 4 in result, because that's not result, that's your interpretation. In your summary, which is the first paragraph, you say, this is not instructional, this is how I write, okay? And everybody develops their writing style. You write 1 in 4, the prevalence shows 1 in 4. In discussing the prevalence, I say the prevalence is high, because the prevalence of 1 in 4, 25% is high, no matter what, even if it is lower than 60% in Asia, and it is higher than the 21% in Norway. 1 in 4 is high, 25% of any day. The cutoff for epidemics is 10%. Once you have anything of 10% and higher, it's an epidemic. Okay, so 1 in 4 is already high. So when I'm not discussing, I'll say the prevalence of drinking Coke is high, although it is lower than Asia, where 60% drink Coke, and it is higher than Uganda, where only 10%. And then I go on and discuss the high. Why might it be high? Why is it in Nigeria it is lower than Uganda, even though they are both in African countries? Why is it that I start to discuss the why? And that is why you must think. That is why when you go and read, you now see that the taste buds in Africans, especially West Africa, is a lot more sensitive to sweet things leads to a lot of craving around sweet things and salt. Than you start to, because you are studying, you look into genetics, you look into history, you look in explaining that high prevalence is a lot of study, because you have to explain it. So I don't know if that XP, we can see that although my result says 23%, my summary says 1 in 4, my discussion is not repeating the figure, it's saying it's high. And I'm comparing, because 1 in 5 is high, okay? If it's 1 in 100, I would say it's low, and it's lower than, higher than, and then I explain it. Okay, so that's how, but it's a skill that you develop with time. And I know many of us who do the other way, like you have already noted, Thomas, we must learn the new skills. If we're saying we're moving the level of our writing to a new level, that's all I'm asking. Even as I am, as at yesterday, I probably have over 340 manuscripts, peer-reviewed manuscripts, okay? I'm not talking about books or anything. I'm not talking about, any other thing, peer-reviewed manuscript. I tell you, if I write a manuscript this morning, I am still moving to a higher level. I still move, I still act, I still add, and that improves my skills, okay? So yes, choose to move to a higher level and improve, but it comes, wine gets better with age, and that's what it is. Thanks for asking the question. Gbemisola. Before Gbemisola asks the question, Toby, please help me to look in the chat box. Dr. Gbemi, please read questions to me that I need to answer. Please unmute Gbemisola so that she can. Gbemisola, please go ahead with your question.
Hello, good morning, Prof, and good morning, everyone on the call. Yeah, my question is around the conclusion. You said that the conclusion will also give us recommendations. But if I look back at some of the writings that I've done before, we normally, of course, after the discussions and everything, will come with recommendations. Then we also go back there and do conclusions. So now that I'm learning a new thing, I'm wondering, how do we do that? Is it still possible that you can still do your recommendations and then still normally do conclusion? And if you have to do it that way, what will that conclusion include? Or should we just say that conclusion you must always put your recommendations in your conclusion? Thank you.
All right, very good question. Well, once again, remember, I don't have a textbook. I'm not reporting textbook. And I always declare this. This is how I have written over the years. And this is how I have found my writing to be very successful. Number two, if you go to the research guidelines, it's not likely that they wrote that, but you find out that there are two sentences, there are two things that must be found in your conclusion: the answer to your objective and recommendation. Your recommendation, remember that this is not a thesis. There's a distinction. I always say it all the time. Writing manuscript is different from writing a thesis. It's different. So when you did your objective, it's one objective. It's not 5 objectives. If you are very skilled, you do 2 objectives. And I've shared in this forum where I tried to do 3 objectives. I went back and forth with the reviewers almost 4 times. Even me myself. It was after that I just said, why did I get myself into this trouble? But I understood where I was coming from. But I found out that it is difficult. It is difficult. So if you had one objective, you find out that you will end up with one recommendation, 1 or 2. Including a recommendation includes the fact that you're saying further studies are needed, because when you are discussing, you are highlighting the gaps in knowledge, despite the fact that you've answered the question. Recommendations, remember, it's just 1 or 2 objectives. Recommendations coming in within your discussion is an unusual writing pattern. Of course, if you are doing thesis, I'm not talking about thesis, I'm talking about manuscripts, where you found your recommendation, which is like a next step, which is like what is going on. The recommendation, I'm talking about writing things in a powerful way. It's, this is not the place where you're just writing because you just want to write sake. That's thesis or thesis, just write for writing's sake. Here is about moving the world to the next level, moving your population, moving your target audience that you're writing to the next. It's a concise recommendation generated from your study, and it usually comes in the conclusion piece. The conclusion is oftentimes just a paragraph. That is you don't start an essay in conclusion. It's just a paragraph. So you answer your first sentence, your opening sentence is the answer to your objective. It doesn't talk anything about the limitations. It is the answer to the objective, and that recommendation you would have already seen. You as a reader would have seen it coming as you are reading the discussion, but now you're stating it concretely as a recommendation. Like I said in the manuscript, it's rare to start writing recommendation within the body of the discussion. You are discussing. You're starting to discuss. In that discussion, you are highlighting gaps, but you have not made it a recommendation. The recommendation ideally comes in the conclusion. I hope that helps a little. If it does, yes, let me know in the chat box. Toby, please, can you read questions for me in the chat box?
All right, Ma.
Thank you.
So we have a question from Adeni. Says, well done, Prof. Can the discussion be in separate paragraph based on the objectives of the study?
Okay, so like I said, if you have objectives, recall, like I said many times. Well, I'm trying to respond to you. I assume what you're saying is that you would, in paragraph 1, you would answer one question. Paragraph 2, you answer one question. Paragraph 3. That's how everybody does it. I think that's how people do it. Remember that when we started this manuscript writing session, we had already highlighted that you must be conscious of writing patterns. In your writing pattern, one paragraph only addresses one issue. You can't be writing 4 issues in a paragraph. I was very recently reading my PhD student's thesis, and I had to get it back to him that I'm tired. One paragraph will be discussing 5 different issues. No, one paragraph discusses an issue, and you start that paragraph with the issue and then discuss it. You don't start looking for it at the end. So that's very important. We have clarity about that. However, even when you are discussing your findings as per objective in different paragraphs, remember I use the word transition. They must be linking. You don't just discuss paragraph 1, age, and then the paragraph 2, just sex. The paragraph 3, you just start socioeconomic status. There must be a link. There must be a reason why you're moving from paragraph 1 to paragraph 2. In that your paragraph 1, even when I talk about age, there must be an introduction to suggest that there's something linking with sex, and then you go to the next paragraph before you discuss sex in full. So yes, where you have, I think my key message is that yes, as an appropriate writing style, you must have distinct, your paragraphs must say something distinctly, but like a good novelist, there must be a reason for me to move into your next paragraph. That comes from reading even the first paragraph, the preceding paragraph, and therefore I want to continue to read. Don't just leave paragraphs independent of themselves without linking it. And the powerful word is transition sentence. What if you want to go and read about transitions, how to write transition sentence? It's powerful. Without that link and helping you to make your discussion a story, it becomes a lot more challenging. I hope that helps you in a little way. But like introduction, the discussion section is also skills. What you find out in your research guidelines, and I tell people, go and read it. Your research guideline might have about 22 points that they want to see, 22 in your manuscript. 15 of it is in the methodology. The guidelines about introduction and discussion is usually less because they are expecting you to write like a novelist, right? A good writer. So guidelines is less in those sections, unlike what you find in other sections. And what methodology, which is like ABC. And the guidelines in methodology is usually plenty and strong because once you fail on methodology, you will get a reject. If you fail on introduction and discussion, they will guide you. Even result, they will guide you because your data is genuine and solid. But once you fail on methodology, that's the reject point because you have collected the data. There's no way you can edit it. There's no way that, and then they reject it. Okay, but introduction, result, they can say, go and don't do logistics, don't do binary, go and do multinomial regression analysis. Don't do chi. This one looks like a skew. Go and use a non-parametric. They can give you those guidelines. Even if you are writing qualitative, they can tell you, no, these quotes are too much. You can synthesize. They can give you guidance. But once result is wrong, and so you find out in your guidelines, the big chunk is on methodology. Therefore, the big chunk of your paper should be methodology. Discussion is fluidity, good English, good skills in doing that, but everybody can learn it. Nobody is born with exception. With everybody, well, maybe people are born, I don't know, but everybody can learn. Everybody can learn and acquire skills that enables them to be called a genius. All right, so be any other question?
Yes, ma'am. So talking about ABCs of manuscript writing, we have a question from Abdulwahab Zenat Morenike. Please, ma'am, can you tell us what the ABCs of manuscript writing are?
That's what the whole session is about. That's what the whole training is about. So that's the ABC. But if you want to go fast, please go to the research guidelines. It shows you the ABC. Okay. Yes. Next question. We have very few minutes.
It does. Thank you very much, ma'am. It does appear to me that the ordering in discussion is editorial policy. For example, some editors have strengths and limitations last rather than first. From Richard.
It's not an editorial policy, it's a research guideline issue. I will refer to that. Go to your research guidelines, you'll see it. Your result, the summary, go to your research guidelines. Research guidelines it's not global, it's not journal related, it's not global. There's no journal that says write your, there's no journal, there's nowhere in that world, I can assure you that, write your limitation before. There's no journal. It's a guideline. There's research guidelines to follow. Like I said, it doesn't mean nobody will accept your paper. Please note, there's not anything I've said here. Even if you write it some other way, no, it doesn't mean people don't. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying these are guidelines I have used in my life, and I don't get. I go straight into comments from peer reviewers that I get. I really get rejects. Really get rejects, okay? And this is what I've followed that has enabled me. But I have followed it because this is what the research guidelines say. There's no journal that says write your study limitation before. There's no journal. Okay, thank you. We have very few more minutes. How many? Do you have one or two more questions?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So we have a question from Mary. She said, "Ma, can you suggest a platform where I can write to improve my where I can visit to improve my writing skills as a beginner?
I wish I could, but I'm sure Google will. YouTubes have so many things. I don't think there's anything that is not on YouTube. Okay, I'm not sure there's anything not on YouTube. But I'm sure if you Google, I Google everything. You would find a reference. I'm sorry I couldn't help on that. But I also see that Professor Dejumo writes here that discussion sounds simple theoretically, but it's a bit complex in practice. And I think you've hit it. It's about practice, 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 practice. One of the things I see when I do we do run manuscript, everything that I'm doing here, when I was the dean of the faculty, we used to do it at a fee, 120,000 naira for 5 weeks of training or 3 months of tutorialship, where we hold you by your hands and walk through with you to write and get a manuscript published. One of the biggest itch that I see is people fall back. They fall back to their old habits very readily. And I think it happens because despite your old habits, you will get your manuscript published. Like Professor Dejumo notes, is that discipline to choose to practice and move on to a new level, despite the fact that you've been publishing even in the old way you've been writing. Okay, so choose to go the hard route. Once you chosen to go the hard route, it then becomes a new habit, and you are better for it. Okay, so all those things we're talking about, all you've been doing here, choose to apply it. It's not enough for you to listen. Without applying it, it's not going to be a habit. It's not going to become a habit. Okay, so I'm encouraging you, don't just listen. I'm hoping that this many weeks of learning, you're going back and applying it. So yes, I agree with Professor Dejumo. Students are encouraged to discuss in line with the objectives. And there's no manuscript without a discussion section. Okay, any other question? I think I might just have just a minute.
Okay. From Promise, it says a thought discussion is a summary of the result. What's the difference between summary and discussion? Summary.
You're not discussing summary. In your summary, you are pulling your findings together. In your discussion, you're answering the why. That's your discussion. Why is this result like this? That's discussion. You are discussing your finding. Why? Yeah, asking yourself why. Why is it the same with Uganda? Why is it different from Uganda? Why is my result falling short of my hypothesis? When you're discussing, you're answering the question why. Okay, any one more question? We have 2 more minutes.
Okay, I'm going to combine 2 questions in one. So first, what is the difference between a thesis and manuscript, and also the strengths you mentioned in your discussion session is the same as the second paragraph? From the second paragraph, the same as justification?
The strength is not justification. The strength is, you remember one of the things we say very well in your introduction, and I continue to use the word equipoise. You must have a reason why you're doing the study. It's either you're validating or you're generating new knowledge. There must be a reason. It's not just because you want to do you have money, there's a requirement in my school. No. When you're doing research, there must be. It's either you're validating what has existed to say, is this still applicable in this context, or this is not new. Okay, so it has social value. That starts to become a strength. Okay, that starts to itself to become a strength. If you remember also, there are things you used a theoretical lens that had not been used before to evaluate a question. That's a strength. You have to, for the first time, looking at this issue through a feminist lens. You have to, for the first time, looking at this issue through a human rights lens. If you're writing a good paper that has a justification, then there'll be strengths. Or you're using a methodology that is robust, you're doing an analysis that had never been done before. Remember that framework. So that becomes strength. So it's not the same as justification. There's strength, okay, and there are limitations. We've come to the top of the hour. We try very much to keep to our hour. And please, you are, wherever spoke you are or up you are, continue to ask the question. I will continue to engage. But please know that it's not just me. You have huge, humongous human resources in the spaces, and they always do share the wealth of experience with you in those spaces. Please don't send personal messages to me. I am not able to deal with all those personal messages, but please put them in those spaces. People get to them earlier than me, and they are brilliant. And together as a community, we can help ourselves. On that note, I want to say thank you for being here today, and have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.